G'day and welcome to the Hunters Campfire Podcast. My name's Mark and along with good mate Ian, we're here to help with all things hunting. If you're looking to start but don't know where to begin, you want to make the most of your next trip away or even plan that hunt of a lifetime, we've got something for you. You'll find our podcasts on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon and plenty of others. And if you want more, head over to our YouTube channel, The Hunters Campfire, where we have plenty of how-to and hunting videos along with the full video production of every podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and good hunting. Good evening, sports fans. How are we this evening?
The sports fans. Great, Mark. Thanks, mate. Yep.
Yeah, doing well, mate. Thank you.
Good. And tonight with us is Daniel Kuhl from Eureka Tactical, and we'll be talking to Daniel about all sorts of cool stuff in regards to the current feral deer strategy. Thanks for joining us, Daniel.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
There we go. Now, before we jump into that stuff, which is kind of like the reason we're here tonight, let's do our usual round robin. So, Daniel, I'm positive that you are a regular listener to us, so you know what we're going to talk about. But just assuming that you may have missed it, what we usually do when we start the podcast is we have a bit of a kind of around the traps, what's happening for each of us in the hunting, shooting, and otherwise scene, and then we'll jump straight into the content. So, Jono, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Pretty quiet on my side, just working hard. Still trying to finalise plans for the Raw. I've committed to Ian that I'll have an answer to him by the end of this week, whether I'm chasing red deer or heading to the state forest down in New South Wales to join deer camp. So, Ian, that's still on track.
Right here and say, anyone who's listening, just give Jono a little bit of encouragement as to why he shouldn't be wandering the bush by himself and should be coming to deer camp.
Look, I've got a serious problem with this. Nothing's happening, says the man who Bellini loophole arrived for today. Oh, nothing's happening. Just,
Well, that's very true. I haven't seen it yet, but yes, I have been reliably informed that I have a nice Benelli Lupo in 3006, a caliber I said I would never own, but I can be swayed, so I'm very, very keen to see that. The PTA will be going in straight after the podcast. So
why is it that you said you'd never own a 3006, John?
Oh, look, I think
do you want to name your the competition?
I'm interested to hear about this.
So I got my first 308 when I was 18 years old, living in South Africa. And the reason why I went for a 308 is because my best mate who introduced me to hunting, Rory, he had a 3006. So I could not get the same caliber as him because we had to be different. So throughout my my hunting career, I have owned multiple 308s. I still own multiple 308s and have not owned a 3006 because that'll give him bragging rights because I have succumbed to the other 30 caliber.
Well, here's a chance, Rory. Hope you're listening.
Go. Well, Rory, he's got a far better rifle than you, but it's fair.
That's for sure, yeah.
I've had a look at it, and it's very, very nice.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that, and maybe I'll be swayed from the 308. We'll see.
There we go. Ian?
It's been a hell of a week, actually. Lots of stuff going on. I've got my honker hunter's hat on in support of the 4-duck ruling down south, so we're feeling for you guys, and anyway, it's just one of those decisions, and I'm sure there's lots of people up in arms and things are being written and whatnot. But yes, anyway, it's a bit disappointing for everyone down there that's been waiting for that result. What else has happened? I've been really getting most stuff ready for the rut. We've got 5 weeks to go before we head down into that camp, and we've got a whole bunch of people coming down to join us, so that's going to be fun. I've taken the BRX that I used up in the NT, pulled the red dot off it, the aim point, and put on the Steiner Predator 8, which is a beautiful piece of glass. So really interested to see how that runs. Bore sighted it today, looking forward to sighting it in properly over the weekend. So that'll be a good one. Just got off YouTube before coming onto the podcast tonight and noticed that 2 of our good friends, Nasir and Muhammad, both friends of the podcast, both took some advice off us and went out and started chasing deer in state forest hunt. I paired them up via the socials, just introduced them to each other, and I noticed there's a newly released video of the two of them hunting, I think, Tugalo, by the looks of it, and successfully taken another couple of deer down there. So well done, fellas. I think that's a fantastic result, and good on you for catching up with each other, not knowing each other before the podcast, and now I'm sure you'll be hunting buddies for a long time. So fantastic stuff. What else is happening? Just lots of planning. New pack arrived from the States, which is the Kuhl Venture 3000. I really wanted to pick up a pack like that just so that it had a holster for the rifle, so I could manhandle the camera gear before the gun. And, just heaps going on. So looking forward to 5 weeks' time.
It's really good news about that with Nasir and Mohammed and that video. I was really I haven't watched it. It only popped up in my feed, but I haven't had a chance to watch it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Actually, I think I saw it on Hunting Australia. I'm not sure. But it's great.
Well, I saw it came from Nasir, and then there were two fellas walking, and he said, and he described the fact that they'd not met. They've only just met. They've shared some stories, and they've gone hunting. And his name was Mohammed. So I was pretty sure, but I wasn't 100% sure. I could only see the back of one of the guys, so it was hard to. Yeah. But good on him. Good job.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Mark?
I went for the hunt with Gemma Dunn, who's been on the podcast a couple of times, and Joe from New South Wales, who we've spoken to at the Toowoomba show. We had a hunt planned, and it came off. So we were about 100 k's north of Goulburn, so below Sydney. It was a significant drive. I came home in a day. I think at 1,120 k's in a day, but it was a great hunt. We hunted a private block to start with, full of goats. I mean, like full of goats. It's like kicking the goats out of the way to get to the goats. Gemma took 4 or 5. I took a couple, and then we pivoted out of there to Pennsylvania State Forest, which was only about half an hour away, maybe a bit longer, but an easy drive, mostly bitumen until you got to the State Forest. We hunted there just for the afternoon. We were there till the next morning, but we only went for a quick look around on the Monday morning. The State Forest came alive at about 5 o'clock. With logging trucks and machinery going on. So it's a working forest, and they kicked off pretty early on Monday morning, which I think, didn't do us any favours. But on the Sunday afternoon, we went for a walk, just walked into the wind and, went, let's just go right with the wind. And on the way back, bumped a couple of spikers, a really chocolatey one and a blonde spiker. And tried to get Gemma on a spiker, but she turned to me and said, "Look, I'm just not ready. You go for it." So I dropped the blondie, and so we got a deer as well. And we were only in there for about 3 to 4 hours, so that was pretty exciting. And I didn't realise that weekend, not only was that the first time that Gemma had ever really been like on a typical scrub bush hunt type thing like that, unguided, just by herself. Or with friends, but it was also the first time she'd ever seen wild deer in a wild location. So she'd seen them on the side of a road and things like that, but that was the first time she'd ever seen deer in Australia in a hunting location. And on that weekend, she actually got a chance to see deer 3 times. So that was pretty special.
That's great, eh?
That's awesome.
The first afternoon when we saw them, they were with goats, and I went, "Gee, that's a funny looking goat." Hang on, and sure enough, 2 deer. They were real skittish. And we saw them again the next day, right in the middle of the day too, in the heat. And then, as I said, we picked up a deer at Pennsylvania, which was great.
So you came home a day early and you drove.
Yeah, well, we were supposed to hunt.
How many hours?
We were supposed to hunt through Monday morning and then come and leave. I was intending to leave around Monday afternoon, drive for 6-7 hours and find a place to pull over and actually do the podcast that night. But by 7:30, the forest was just, it's machines, trucks, just going. It's like in a construction site. So we said, "Hey, look, let's just call it quits. We've got goats, we've got deer. Let's call it quits." So yeah, it was 1,120 k's from camp.
You you were fairly tired when you got back and jumped straight on a podcast. And I'm just going to say there is an upcoming podcast. You'll notice that Mark was a little bit tired, but there is a merch pack going out to the first person who messages me to tell me at what moment in time on that podcast Mark fell asleep. It did happen. He caught himself. It did happen. We won't tell you who it was.
Yeah,
moment in time, send it to me and I'll get your merch back.
Yeah, it was. I was pretty flogged. And I was a bit
good.
more. That was stinky too. I was stinky.
Yeah, well, we can't tell that virtually.
So as part of the hunt, I started using these things, which is the Steiner Predators LRFs, or laser rangefinders. Man, I love these things. These things are so cool. And the only downside is they're about that much too long for my current chest rig, because they've got the brains in them, so they're just a little bit longer than a standard 10x42. But other than that, they are just lovely.
10x42s are
they're just
usually pretty big anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I've got 10x42s, but when you put them up together, basically, there's that much, which is the brains component, which makes them. So other than that, they're not a particularly bulky rangefinder bino at all. And it's pretty simple. It's just, point and shoot type thing. And one interesting thing I found out was that in the really early light, if you're looking at something and you just can't make it out, if you actually range it, it introduces light into the
tubes.
Into the tubes, and you actually can see better.
Oh.
Different tone.
Yeah, it's quite. I went, look at that.
Daniel, what's going on? Are you planning for a rut or the raw this year? I see you're conservation through hunting, and we're here to talk about it. But how active are you this year in pursuing game?
I am planning multiple hunts over the next couple of months. I've been just looking at all these state forests, kind of along the border, just because see what's within 6 hours of Brisbane. Not really a big fan of driving long distances anymore. Done it a bit too much. So if I can find places I can do within a weekend or a long weekend, that'd be great. But almost all of them are closed due to other floods or fires, and it's New South Wales just can't catch a break. It's not just floods; it's floods or fires. And then there's planning another hunt a bit further south in New South Wales as well, which should be for deer, which is fairly exciting. It'll be sort of the furthest I've travelled. I've just come back from a farm trip last week, which was meant for pigs, but I kind of just sat around with the farmer and talked the whole time. We didn't actually get any hunting in, so I'll be going back out there soon to actually hunt some pigs, just after or end of March. So yeah, I've got quite a few hunts planned over the next few months.
Cool.
That's very good.
Very nice.
Oh, well, good luck with it.
Any talk about hunting pigs gets my attention.
Yeah, Mark loves the pigs.
You got to get rid of them, Farmers don't like them.
No, that's for sure.
I'm very fond of them.
Other people's.
I'm very fond of them. Okay, so let's jump into it. So how we got here this evening was that after our first podcast about the feral deer action plan, and I can't even remember the correct title of it, we got a message, if I remember correctly, from Zach Williams, who's the Hunting Connection podcast, that we should have a chat with Daniel. And so, did all the, what was it? It wasn't on Facebook Messenger. It was on
Instagram.
It was Instagram.
I think.
Instagram Messenger, which is even harder for me to find, But we managed to figure it out, and so it was a bit of a back and forth about coming on, and Daniel, suggested that there, wanted to talk about some of the points we made in the in our podcast, specifically, if I remember correctly, around the idea of deer-specific poisons and baits and things like that. So he said, yeah, sure, more information is better. So let's do it. So that's how we got here tonight. Now, to give this some context, and Ian's got the details. are you a guy who likes to go out and hunt, but you've also got some science behind your opinion.
Yeah. So I've got a Bachelor of Science in biology, and so majored in biological sciences, and then minored in wildlife ecology and environmental science, and I had a major focus on invasion ecology. Was kind of where I steered my degree, because everything we hunt in Australia is an invasive species, and I like to hunt, so may as well spend that HEX debt on doing something to do with hunting.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
That's an interesting way. So, lucky you didn't study gambling.
Well, it's a bit of a gamble on you in the first place.
You'd be in the casino. You could be spending your HEX deck in the casino. But anyway, so that's it. Yeah, that's a nice approach.
And as a day job, you also now do you own this business, Daniel?
Yes.
Eureka Tactical.
Yeah, so I own Eureka Tactical. With
you're in the industry as well, so you've really focused your life around the outdoors, hunting, and everything that goes with it. So it should be a really good, interesting conversation.
Okay, so I suppose maybe the place to start is we'd like to hear, I suppose, to begin with, your take on some of the things we said, but or more importantly, those things that resonated with you that you wanted to discuss in detail. So how about we hand it over to you and away you go.
So you just want me to say nice things about you? Is what I'm getting.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't. I'm not going to complain if you do, but you can say other things. But
yeah. So basically, I listen to all the podcasts. I listen to I read everything that comes out in the hunting world. All the magazines and all the publications and all that. And after listening to your podcast, or I guess a few podcasts ago on this plan, I found it fantastic, because and it's something I really want to commend you guys for, all three of you, because it really was, I think, the best piece of media about this plan that's been published through any of the mediums in in Australia, because you emphasized that you don't really know all the finer details, and that's really nice. That's good, because you're not acting like you knew everything. And really about the poisons, you read it correctly, and you guys are the first people to actually talk about the poison part correctly. And that was just really refreshing, because there's been lots of articles and commentary, like either Facebook comments or posts, etc., which really hammered on about the poisons part of it, believing that they're wanting to drop 1080 everywhere to kill deer, and it's that's not what it says, and you guys read that correctly. So I just, that's why I messaged you guys. I just really wanted to commend you for that. And I guess all your good points come in with that is that you didn't come in with a big ego or in a highly emotional state. It was just read it. It was oh, that's interesting, and went from there. So
yeah.
That's kind of all the good points.
We fluked that one. But so, thanks for acknowledging that we fluked that one. So let's start with the poison. So what is your take on that? Because our take was we don't know.
And
so what's your take on
that? Is the best take, because if you go into it, it's on page 19, right? This plan supports the development and registration of one or more baits for feral deer through the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority. So what they're suggesting is that, exactly that. They would support an entity, which could be a research lab, which could be a university, which it could be like CSIRO funded deal, starting trials, starting research on a bait, on a poison that could target deer and just deer, and using 21st century ethics, using 21st century morals to guide that plan, and experimental design, and that's just what it says. And there's been a lot of commentary, like this through all the groups and stuff, of people misinterpreting that or making clickbait titles or clickbait posts, etc. Just saying, oh, they're wanting to put poison everywhere, they're wanting to do this or that, and it's like, no, they're not. So I think the best place to start is actually to define they, because that really hasn't been talked about much, and I think that really should be. So first, we need to sort of figure out, like, okay, what is an action plan to begin with, right? Because I think that's sort of where you need to start. So because it's an actual thing in sort of the conservation world, in science. So an action plan is an outline of an issue. So you find an issue, and then you write up an issue methods. You identify all of the methods and all of the tools which can be used in fixing the issue, and then a multi-step task list, essentially, with a set of achievable objectives to meet an end goal. So with this, they've identified the deer are causing problems to the Australian environment. So they have sort of made a sort of executive summary. That's at the start, just showing the kind of damage that they do. That's identifying the issue. Then most of the pages after that are talking about the different tools and methods that are available, such as, the baits, thermals, ground shooting, helicopter shooting, etc. And that's one of the things I have a problem with. We'll come back to. And then they have a set of objectives that can be met to try and meet the end goal of a large population decline in deer numbers in Australia. And so then in the conservation world, that actually comes into something called a conservation action plan, a CAP, which is the same thing, except it's very specifically on the topic of environmental conservation. So think of it as like a list of strategies to help fix an outlined topic. Now, it's not legislation. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting caught up. This is not a piece of legislation at all. It's written by a community group, like a working group of different stakeholders. And there's a lot of
commissioned by who, Daniel?
Yep. Okay,
who decided to make this happen? Like, was it we know it came out. It was South Australia, wasn't it? It came out, or was it Western Australia?
Neither of those.
South Australia.
So on the page itself, down the bottom, there's a disclaimer. So this was primarily put together by an organization called the Centre for Invasive Species Solutions, which is a community based organization, or like a member-based organization. And these members include the Federal Australian Government, Department of Agriculture. Most states have some sort of stake in it. So like the biosecurity sections, maybe New South Wales DPI, South Australian, the department you just listed. And there's other associate members such as like the Invasive Species Council, and like wool producers are part of this thing. And so they'll I guess they'll want to put together the working group, probably at the discretion of the federal government. And I forgot where I was going with that. So that's who is sort of behind putting together the working group, the Centre for Invasive Species Solutions. It's a NGO, it's a non-profit, non-government organisation full of stakeholders.
Yeah, it was one of the.
Is that what we used to call a CRC?
What's a CRC?
So a research centre, a community research centre.
I'm not sure if they do their own research, but most likely, yeah, because they at least facilitate research, as far as I know, and sort of can direct it. And so they're made up of government organizations, like departments and all that.
Of representation from each of them. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And in this one specifically, you've got a member from like the SSAA, you've got New South Wales DPI, I've got some from Queensland in it. There's a whole bunch of different stakeholders who have come together to to write this. This is a proposal for an action plan and not legislation. So that's really important. So this is not a piece of legislation. And so like stakeholders who this would apply to, which would be land managers of either the state down to individual private property owners. So that would include council regions, large properties, different sort of agriculture. They can choose to adopt these strategies and implement them how they see fit and within their already written legislation. Does that make sense? Or did I...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I noticed in the plan they talked about a community liaison or advisor that was out there, and obviously their role is to educate the large landholders and the LGAs and state and various other people that they would like to participate, that the action plan exists and that there is a framework for them to follow. I guess that's what that role was describing.
Yeah, exactly right. Because and I think that it's really important to start with that, so we can define like who they are and really what this plan is. This plan is just a list of strategies. It's not going to each of the different state legislators and be like, hey, you have to implement new laws that dictate more culling.
That's right. Technically, this couldn't be legislation. Could this fall under federal legislation of any sense?
Not really.
So,
not that I know of.
No, I can't see how this could be any kind of. This would ultimately be enacted at a state base. This would be a typical state by state issue, and so that's where the you would get more than likely. Well, so maybe it's a better way to say it. You would get very unlikely you would get uniformity across the states in regards to its approach.
Yeah, that's right. But the job of this action plan is really to outline objectives that each state could meet and to show them not all the tools, but a lot of tools which they recommend. But unfortunately, they left out recreational hunters, who I think are the most important tool.
Okay, now you brought it up. I was waiting.
That's and what's your take on why they left out recreational hunters?
And before you answer that, how, if you said that there was representation from SSAA in this group, I find it even more interesting that it was not included. But I find it really interesting that they were mentioned as a program like what SSAA have done in part of this document as well. So Mark's question, but I'm just interested as to how hunting was left out altogether, given that there was some representation. Yeah,
and so they wrote down that they believe it's not within their scope to create directives for recreational hunters or the recreational hunting community at least, and that I can't remember the exact wording because I lost all my markers on my on my printout, but they outline that recreational hunting goals are in contrast to conservation objectives, right? And they're kind of right. They kind of are. I mean, the point, recreational hunting, if you talk to a lot of people in the community or to sort of gather the general ideas of what the community says is, if you get rid of the deer, there's not going to be deer hunting. So, I mean, they're kind of right. Recreational hunters want deer to hunt.
There's nothing in it that says that there's a chance that recreational hunting or the deer go away altogether. And to a point that Mark made a while back, and probably more than once, leaving it out of the plan as one of the tools. It's the most effective tool in Victoria so far, whether hunters agree with the end goal or not. hunters in Victoria are taking more deer out of the bush than any one of these other tools that are in their plan.
Or actually, probably all of the other tools combined. Combined. So it's bizarre that I hear what you're saying, that it's not within their charter to advise recreational hunters how to go about their business. So maybe that's why they leave it out a little bit. But
they also can't direct legislation. So with Queensland, we don't have the same type of hunting that Victoria has. Now, it's not within their power to go to the Queensland state government and say, "Hey, you need to implement a state forest hunting program." So it's not within their power to do so. And that's important to to understand.
Look, I understand that, but I do think that I do think there's and I read an article about it, and there's this an over politicization of hunting, and I to me, that's what the plan. When they say it's not in their wheelhouse to talk about recreational hunting, I kind of go, okay. And the reason why they say it, which is okay, because they're saying that recreational hunting is controlled by certain legislative requirements, and so we can't enact that. And I would have accepted that. But then they kind of do the but anyway, and the but anyway is that recreational hunters have different outcomes or different goals. So since those goals are incompatible, we don't want to talk to them. But I actually find that a little odd. And that this is what I've said it a couple of times, is that dead deer are dead deer.
But what recreational hunters is in conflict with what they're trying to achieve, because recreational hunters are going to manage the resource, because we want to hunt tomorrow. We want our children to hunt. That's not what this plan is doing. This plan is to eradicate deer, or to reduce their numbers significantly. And
that's right.
That's not what we're doing. We're going out there looking for some venison to put on the table. We're going to look out for a nice set of antlers to put up on your wall. That's managing a resource. That's in conflict with what they're trying to achieve.
Most definitely.
And that's why they've excluded it.
And
I think by mentioning it, they've put a lot of people's backs up.
Yeah.
And this is what's created the emotion. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is too, if we step away from the emotion, is that I can't think of a single vertebrate species that we've removed in this country once we've introduced it. But you might know of any. I can't think of any.
No, I don't think we've been successful in removing any vertebrates. Some have just naturally died out. But of these established pests, and you're right.
Yeah, that's right. We've had no success. Once they're here, they tend to dig in, and they dig in very effectively. Two, to date, the way we try to get rid of them is we poison, we shoot them, we trap them, and we build a fence. And this plan says, hey, there's this problem called deer, which we want to get rid of. So technically, we're running at zero for, I don't know how many introduced species there is, but we're running at zero for something to get rid of them. And just like every other unsuccessful attempt that we've tried so far, we're going to try and shoot them, trap them, and poison them, and build a fence around them. And you kind of go, guys, how many times do you have to lose before you realise maybe there's a different way to approach this? And that, for me, is what the crux of the challenge of this plan is. It's if you had a friend who was trying to fix a car, and every time he's tried to fix a car, he took a hammer to it, and you say, look, mate, maybe there's a different way. Eventually you'd say, look, maybe you should just let someone else have a different view, different approach to that. But what's what we're doing here? I mean, I can't see anything in this plan that is not something that's been tried before.
Well,
the technology might be slightly different. The improvements might be there, but basically, since rabbits, foxes, cats, goats, pigs, wild dogs, it's been about build a fence, and that fence may be artificial, or might be a hardwire fence, or it might be some other kind of fence. Trap them in the various ways, shoot them, and poison them or bait them in one way or another. And so is there something that I'm missing in this plan that is different to those approaches?
I would say, because you've generalized it so much, no, but also yes, when you really get down into the weeds of it and really sort of look into exactly the new research and the new controls that, well, sort of the improvements rather to the control methods, right? So, biggest one, thermal. Thermal has been a huge improvement to the way humans can identify and then kill animals, really. I mean, just the fact that anyone really can get a device, handheld device, that you can, if you're sort of at a elevated position, can look down and find many animals in a field or at nighttime, even during the day. That's massive, right? So the ability to find animals through thermal greatly improves success rates of finding and then killing deer, or any animal really, but we're talking specifically about deer. And there've been studies to show that. And then beyond that, thermal on drones is massive at the moment. I know multiple researchers who actively use drones to find wildlife, either invasive species or endemic species, and the rate they can find these animals using thermal drones is, multitudes of order higher than anything like 10 years ago, definitely way higher than 20 years ago. And so just being able to identify new incursions of deer into places using thermal drones is massive. And then that will be able to drive resources to try and fight those deer, right? And then going beyond that, thermal drones with artificial intelligence, that's also a huge game changer. Artificial intelligence is being used massively in invasion ecology, especially with like in the Great Barrier Reef. There's a few fox things going on at the moment with artificial intelligence and identifying like sort of foxes, and then there's new monitoring techniques. So if you just look at it as a very generalized idea of it's just an extension of shooting, it's an extension of trapping, etc. It's really not. It's a whole new world out there. They've got like cat traps, which AI can identify a cat and only poison that cat and nothing else, because it's identified a cat and like sprayed a poison onto it or such. So it's not the same techniques as 10 years ago. It's not the same techniques as 15 years ago. It's a whole new thing out there. So that's why.
So we're getting smarter, but the animals are the same.
Yeah.
And I've seen the AI work in ag. I've seen drones that go out and they scan grasses, they scan weeds, and they target spray. I can see how I can do that. If they can develop a unique heat signature for a deer or some unique identifier that allows you to spot it and then count it, then I can see how they're going to be able to target specific areas with that. They'll have problems with those in dense forests and bush and things that are a long way away. They've still got to be able to get those drones in and out, on batteries and those sorts of things. But I can see that. I can see that as a benefit. I can't see it as a benefit for let's call it a weaponized drone that's going to go and attack the deer at the same time. I've seen drones fly over deer and they run for their lives, from quite some distance away. But I can see how they could spot them.
Yeah. So there's definitely tools either developed now and still developing that can really, really assist, their objectives. Their objectives aren't unreasonable, or rather unachievable. If the state really decides to adopt the plan and try and do these new things, I wouldn't say that we'll get down to like, no deer, but just to generalize this whole thing to down. Oh well, it's still just shooting, it's still just trapping. It's really inaccurate. It's crazy the stuff that they can do now. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I hope it did.
No, it is. I
100%.
mean, it's certainly. I mean, so what we're saying is that while those mechanisms are still the same, their effectiveness has increased dramatically.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I don't know if I was listening to. I think it was your podcast where you sort of made the comparison between like iron sights and a scope, right? This is way beyond that. Like, this is way beyond the effectiveness of going from iron sights to a scope. So yeah, it's not really unreasonable objectives to. I think they are somewhat achievable.
Okay. Moving to... Sorry, go, Mark.
No, you go, mate, go.
I was just going to say, out of the other control methods that they talked about, are there any others? And let's leave bait out for a second.
Okay.
It's going to be a fun conversation in its own right. But are there any other major advancements in technology that you can see that are going to aid this plan? Or that's the main game changer rather than...
Well, the main one is technology, but also they talk about using like contract shooters and volunteer shooters, right? And so this is actually basis in a very large study done in Victoria, using members from the ADA to assist in a culling operation, essentially, where I can't remember who the researchers were, but they were looking at the cost effectiveness and just kill effectiveness of volunteers versus contract shooters, right? And so they each had sort of their own blocks and were to hunt in the same sort of time periods, not at the same time as each other, but over the same course of time, right? And the contract shooters, well, under Victorian legislation, were allowed to have whatever contract shooters are allowed to have, which includes thermally assisted devices, which recreational hunting you can't do, and suppressors. And I think some were able to use semi-autos, but I don't recall the details of the study that much. Whereas the volunteer shooters, so the goal wasn't to go out and recreationally hunting, the goal was to shoot as many deer as possible, would use their bolt actions. I think they maybe had 2 thermal devices, which they could swap between each other. I think they were supplied, and no suppressors, right? I think they were allowed to spotlight, but no suppressors. And the effectiveness of the contract shooters was quite a bit more than the volunteer shooters, because of, well, if you've got a business that's based around pest control, then you're going to invest in the tool. So they had the best thermal equipment, and they had vehicles like buggies that they would drive around them, because that's what the contractors had, and suppressors. And the use of suppressors was actually noted in this study to be one of the main factors as to why they were so much more effective than the volunteer shooters. And that's really interesting. But they also cost a lot more. They cost a lot more. And they cost a lot more per deer killed as well, which is really, really important if we're going to be looking at like the economy of using contract shooters all across Australia or such. And so I think that's very important to look at when we're looking at tools. Is contract shooters very effective, but cost a lot.
Mm-hmm. So how does that play out then? I mean, because in the document itself, it talks about, like the forming of community-based volunteers to be involved in this product. It actually talks about that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so they encourage, I guess, farmer assist type programs of, I don't know who they are encouraging to fund it or organize it, just that they are encouraging volunteer team-based style organizations that will, choose to go out and shoot deer when there's other incursions found or when they're told to or such. That I don't think they sort of really nailed down, because you can't do that in most states, right? And I don't know too many people, and this doesn't mean that they don't exist. I don't know too many people who would be willing to go out and just shoot deer to shoot and drop. So how they're going to fill these numbers up?
The SSAA ran their farm resistance program,
and the conservation, the CWM.
Yeah. So and that's probably potentially the SSAA influence into that document was around those volunteer groups. But I think there is people out there who are willing to volunteer their time to do it. I guess it's probably more is do the landowners want people running around with firearms? That's potentially, I think, why that uptake has been so low. But if it's being mandated by state government or federal government, then potentially that uptake might be higher.
Yeah, I mean, there's provision in Queensland these days for local government to allow people onto land that they control as an LGA level. It's been around for some time, and that recently came to the forefront again around one of the petitions that went through. If you had a framework that allowed a club to go and certify and become, tick the boxes, I've got the insurance, we've run the training, we've got, a level of certification for our members, and they were there on a record for Toowoomba Regional Council to say, the local guy that's the coordinator of Southeast Queensland is educating these guys to say there's 3 different clubs up here that can help you with that problem out the back of the dam. Call on them if you wish. I can see how that can come together, how that gets coordinated, and how bias remains out of it. One club doesn't turn it into a boys' club, and then the next club tries to get into it. There's been this problem around the hunting community for forever. Once one person gets access, or once one group gets access, they try and stop the rest because it's what they want to do. Like, I get it. It's not right, but I understand human motives. But the framework could allow it. I can sort of see how this plays in.
Yeah, so I guess it might be possible then to implement.
So I suppose one of the as you said, the kind of really caustic points for a lot of people is the idea is baits and poisoning. And I suppose whilst there was lots of talk about 1080, I mean, some of that talk is based on the fact that they use 1080 in places, and I mean, and they've been poisoning or baiting deer in New Zealand for a number of years. So there is. So I suppose in real terms, from my point of view, is if they're going to develop a specific deer only bait, having a science degree myself, won't they already go for what already exists and see what they can modify or use? I mean, that's how science is. You don't necessarily create something completely new. You see what's around and you see what other people are using and their effectiveness of it, and you measure it and you determine, well, maybe that's the option that we use here.
Daniel, the scientist, might correct me here, but a major difference between New Zealand and Australia is that the byproduct or the unintended kill in New Zealand is also a pest. There are no vertebrate species. There are no mammals in New Zealand that are native. There aren't any. It's a bird sanctuary, basically. Here, you drop a bait. If a native animal, a roo, a wallaby, a wombat, a koala or something picks it up, it could die too. New Zealand doesn't have that problem. The birds do, sure. But I think that was the undertone of the deer poisoning there is so you kill a tar. Right?
Also feral species.
Also a feral species. Yeah. Daniel, I'm sure you've got a broader perspective on that.
Just to nitpick a little bit, I think there's like native bats in New Zealand, which are mammals. I think. Now I've said it though, now I'm asking myself. And I think there might be some like seals.
Native New Zealand
just a nitpick a little bit. And look,
no, I gotcha. Fur seals, yeah, fur seals.
Okay,
in the middle of the fjordlands, less likely, but that's cool.
Yeah. But no, you're right. In terms of like terrestrial mammals that, quadrupeds and such, there's not. Right. Okay. So there's a few things to understand. It is a bit of a concern. I understand it's definitely a concern that they can just use 1080 or whatever. But when we're talking about this plan specifically, either as a podcast or when writing an article or making commentary in hunting groups or whatnot, it's really important to not make things up. And that's been my biggest contention with the commentary on this, and why you guys did so well, is because people are saying, this thing says they're going to drop 1080, they're going to do this, or they're talking about the side effects of 1080. And it's like, this doesn't mention that at all, right? And this is talking about developing, and as you said, they'll most likely take what they know already, but that's not what's being suggested. So to act as if what is being suggested is 1080, well, that's just making the hunting community look stupid. It's making the community look like, what's the point of bringing these guys to the table? Because they are like purposefully, well, I shouldn't say purposefully, because I don't know if it is these people's intention to spread misinformation, but these people are putting out misinformation, and then other people are believing the misinformation, right? And I think that's not a good place to be. I think that's really a bad place to be. At the end of the day, this plan, this piece of non-legislation, supports the development of new baits and I guess baiting techniques. And they also mention baits and baiting methods. So, however they deploy the new poison or whatnot, would be used according to relevant legislation in each state and territory at the discretion of authorities, in consultation with landholders, recreational deer hunters, and the commercial harvesting industry. So what this working group supports is consultation with recreational hunters when bait is being developed and when the methodology is being developed, right? And so to then interpret that any other way is doing a disservice to the hunting community. And I think that's really important. And I know your point was like, in reality, it's actually like X, Y, and Z, but to go down that path could be any other. You could say like anything.
I totally agree with the importance of keeping a clear head and reading the document as it reads. And I suppose that's one of the reasons many of our answers was, I don't know, because we don't know. Though I think from the hunting community's point of view is there's also in this document some things that are, let's say, a little rubbery. And I think that also creates a sense of distrust.
Do you have any? I can, because I've got a whole.
Well,
bunch of
for instance,
so if you have any examples, I can talk about it.
Well, for instance, there's this discussion about the seriousness of deer in terms of collisions with cars.
Oh, for sure. That's a great one.
Now, if you go to the insurance people who basically deal with collisions, they don't even get a mention. It kind of goes, if I remember off the top of my head, we showed the graphic, it's something like 90% of kangaroos, and some numbers are actually higher than that. Then it's like, and then some of them split kangaroos between wallabies, and I'm assuming that's because some people say, I hit a kangaroo or I hit a wallaby. Because, they don't often know. There's no forensic investigation. Is that a wallaroo or an eastern grey that you've hit? So it's kangaroos and wallabies, then wombats. And when we got down to the 1%er, it was other. And the image representing the 1%er was a cow. Now, my understanding is that in terms of animals that kill more Australians than anything else, including in multiple car accidents, it's actually them bloody horses. They're the assassins out there that kill us more than anything. So, to say that there is been an explosion in deer to car incidents may be true, but that explosion is still less than 1% of all the incidents recorded by the insurance company. Now, you might say, well, that's because, of location of deer, but the thing is, there's more cars in city urban areas, and there's more accidents happen in urban areas than there is because there's more cars. So this peri-urban area is where most people, I'm assuming, are clipping roos and wombats and cows and other things. So I think, when I read that, I kind of go, okay, well, let's look that up. And sure enough, it doesn't play out as clearly as possible. I think another thing that is also is interesting is that this idea that we're hitting plague proportions in a very short period of time, whereas we've had deer in Queensland for 150 years and we haven't seen the plague yet. So there's that, and to me that sounds, I read that and I read over-politicization of an issue rather than a desire to present a case. And I suppose for me, the third thing that resonates with me is that there's a lovely statement in the beginning about inclusion and about diversity and accepting things like that, and about, the consultation and the inclusion with the community. And another thing that kind of I read about that when I read that was, well, I'm a hunter and I'm also part of the community. So where's that balance? It's like you're saying, well, we're talking about the community, but we're not talking about this group within the community because this group's identified themselves as this over here. So they're sliced out of the community. And I think I kind of don't like that more than anything, to say that I'm not a part of a community because I'm in a group that you don't want to engage with. To me, that's kind of, okay. And so I can understand why people are going, you know what, I don't trust you on this because of those kind of things. So I think there's a significant part of this plan's presentation that I think would, by its very nature, raise people's radar.
Yeah, and I think a lot of documents these days are written with public safety in mind, and to draw public safety into this based on that 1%er seems, an overreach. But good. I mean, great pickup for sure. I'm not sure that's within the science of this, Daniel, but it's 100% part of the reason why people are concerned, because we've got to trust the rest.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. Having putting the vehicle collisions in that document, I think, is a bit of an over exaggeration. But to leave it out will then be, well, you shouldn't leave things out. And when you're
No.
writing, you have to identify every single issue. And I think
but they haven't talked about how many deer have stomped people to death or stabbed them with their antlers. There's so many things that could be left out. People are getting up close and personal with these things in the bush. Maybe there's a danger there too. I get it. It's a tough one. You can't cover everything, but that was a pretty bold thing.
The whole deer on the roads thing is in the news every year. You guys are from Brisbane, so Mogul has deer coming up to the roads at times, and there's always footage every year of some massive deer running on the road. Yeah. So it's something that people do know. I think to focus on that from either the hunting community or them is sort of a misdirection, and not really important either way. The people who have crashed the cars
I drive through Mog all the time.
Yeah,
I drive through Mog all the time. I see more horses near fences than I see deer.
I saw deer just a few weeks ago in there.
I see deer, but I see a hell of a lot more horses than I see deer. So, and that's what I understand that there's voices out there who are, and I suppose my take on this is that I've seen a lot of the stuff that's been spoken about it, and I kind of, whilst I might not agree with it, I have some sympathy for the motivation, because I kind of got the same sense of presentation from parts of the document than I get from some of those podcasts and things that are out there. So I don't think it's all one-way traffic in regards to the sensationalizing of certain parts of the problem. So,
but we can explore some of those things, because I completely ignored.
Yeah, we can.
The second point that you made, and about.
But that's
the
okay. Look, I don't expect you to be the. We didn't ask you on here to back you in a corner and defend things. We really wanted to get your take on it, and from a more of a scientific point of view. And look,
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, I've got that research,
thermals and things like that.
Yeah.
But what I was going to suggest is, so one of the things you did mention, which I thought was very, which was really beneficial, is you said some ideas you had about how you may present a more meaningful case about the importance of deer, and how to frame a response, and how to. So I think that's
okay.
Rather than kind of have an arm wrestle about the points of order, what can we do that may be more? So how could we as hunters respond to this in what you see would be a more effective and more meaningful way? So how?
Okay, that's great. That's a way better direction than what I was thinking.
What's the call? Yeah, what's the call of action here? But and what would be your take on how to approach that call of action?
Okay. No, that's fantastic. That's way better. So I think the first step before writing any piece, because we've got until March 20 to make any submissions. That's when the consultations close, is to not fight any points that they make in terms of damage to the environment, right?
Yeah.
A lot of commentary that
and
I've
why
seen.
Is that? And why is that?
Because it's real.
Okay.
As much as people may want to disagree that deer cause damage to the Australian environment, they do. It's massively researched and not political. They cause a lot of damage to the Australian environment. It's just like what is, right? So to approach any submission in bad faith is not going to create a good argument, right? I mean, if someone comes to you about something and you can just tell they're not wanting to work with you, or they're denying something you've said, it's like, well, if you can't even agree on the basics, it's not going to work out, right? So don't approach something in bad faith. I think the second thing to understand is that what's the best way to put this? Understand exactly what their power is. So we've covered this, that they're just a working group writing a proposal that can be adopted by various stakeholders. It's not legislation. So to act as if they have any power to rewrite legislation is then putting a lot of effort into something that they can't even control. So some of the commentary I've seen is there's a part in this plan about suppressors. And that's fantastic that they are acknowledging that suppressors are a good tool. But they can't go to the New South Wales Firearm Registry and be like, hey, you guys need to make suppressors legal. They're not going to go to Weapons Licensing Branch and say, okay, you need to make suppressors legal. That's not within their power. They have acknowledged that suppressors are good, but they can't change legislation. So approaching them and being like, you need to then change legislation to suit us, that's not going to go anywhere. You've just put then, however long it's taken you to write this submission, and you've just wasted that time. Does that make sense? So
to me, I can understand that. Again, I kind of flippantly said, "Hey, yeah, sure, give me," but obviously they have no control over it. And I think an important point to make is that we're also talking about legislation that's way out of their wheelhouse in terms of weapons licensing and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's not even like a complementary component to what they're talking about in that license. So that's a very long way away from where they're currently at.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's just me saying, like, look, just don't waste your time, because no one likes their time to be wasted. And you're not wasting your time by listening to this podcast, right? So they're the first two things. And then beyond that is...
That remains to be seen, mate. That remains to be seen.
No. So then to further write a good submission is to make a good case for... This is my opinion, for why recreational hunters should be considered as a tool in their goal of introducing a population decline of deer. You may not want that, but the Australian environment definitely wants that, and some farmers would definitely want less deer around. So,
so what you're saying is, in that sense, it's better to be in the tent than outside the tent.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's better to be part of the plan, so then at least you can go hunting, rather than just have some hissy fit and then be excluded from the plan forever, right? And then they go off and kill all the deer anyway. So how do we make a good proposal? Well, start off with economics. Well, we don't have to start off with economics, but we can start off with the economics. And something that you guys brought up is that there's data from Victoria's GMA onto the contribution to the economy that comes from deer hunting. And I think maybe it's hunting in general, which is in excess of $350 million a year. So
now,
to the states.
Now, John, I looked this up.
I did.
If I remember correctly, it's something like about 400 mil for hunting, but they actually separate deer hunting out of that, and it's about 200 mil.
Okay. Only $200 million.
And that's in Victoria. New South Wales do a similar report every year through the DPI, and theirs is, again, it's a significant contribution to the state's economy. And it's also a very targeted contribution, which I think is also really important. So it's not spent in whatever. What's the main street in Sydney? I don't know. But anyway, it's not spent in the CBD. It's actually spent in areas where they may have less opportunity for economic development.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So where to access that information, I think you just need to really just look up Australian hunting contribution to the economy, and it should hopefully bring up the New South Wales DPR report, which came out, I think, like 3 or 4 weeks ago. The GMA report is yearly, in all of their reports. So it's a very
There's one in
significant
Tasmania, but
contribution.
it hasn't. There's one in Tasmania, but it hasn't been as frequent as it once was.
Does Tasmania count, though? I mean, like,
and there goes our podcast.
No, I like Tasmania. Feedback is nice. But you know, so these you don't need to start with contribution to the economy, but that's a good part to include. Find this data. Don't just make it up, and don't leave out references. If you find a piece of information, make sure you reference it, right? So when they read it, they're not just like, hey, these guys are just like making numbers up. You've actually got proof, like evidence, right? Beyond that, well, again, dog's making weird noises. Okay, so
It's just weeing on the floor, mate. Don't worry about it.
Whatever. Just mop it up. So find out about ground shooting, right? The effectiveness of ground shooting versus maybe helicopter culls. You don't really need to like rag on any methods, because we're really just trying to push recreational hunting to the forefront. I don't know if it's a good idea to then bring down other methods or not. But you can.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
There are studies done on the effectiveness of helicopter shooting versus ground shooting, and specifically about the money involved per animal killed. And they even make the point that helicopter shootings are really most effective when they're really trying to rapidly kill a new invasion to a new area, rather than, you know, something to use all the time. So make a case for the effectiveness of just ground shooting, not recreational hunting specifically, just shooting on the ground. And then once you've done that, then, you know, write about how recreational hunting helps. You know, you've got contributions to the economy versus a contract shooter. A contract shooter takes from the economy because they have to be paid. A volunteer shooter, so like these teams, are also reimbursed. And all of the programs so far, and at least the studies done that they reference, or that have just been done, you know, elsewhere, mostly in Victoria, all of the volunteer shooters have been reimbursed in some way or another, so which could be food, ammo costs, or a combination, right? So even within their plan of just like the differences between a volunteer shooter and a recreational hunter, a volunteer shooter costs the state for basically the same effectiveness as a recreational hunter. So, you know, establish that ground shooting is good and it works, but then talk about how recreational hunting is better than those other methods because it has the same effect, close to the same effectiveness, but contributes to the economy, right? That seems pretty valid, and that's a pretty good case there. Now we've talked about that they can't change legislation, but you sort of can, if you're writing objectives for them, that they can put pressure on the state governments to introduce legislation that would create a Queensland game management authority or such. Might not work. It's a bit of a Hail Mary, but you can't hurt to include that, you know, they could put pressure on the states to open recreational hunting in state forestry because of the clear benefits for conservation objectives. Like I said, Hail Mary, but can try. And then after that, so what I've done and what's on my website, and anyone can like look at and sort of try themselves, is make a case for how valid recreational hunting is in terms of taking numbers out of the deer population. As you said at the start, in Victoria, hunters take out more deer than any of the other tools combined. I don't know if that's true or not, but they do take out a lot.
Well, last year they took out 120,000, and I doubt if the others combined took out 130,000.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I don't have those numbers, so I'm not gonna say that it's definitely the case. But it seems likely that it's the case that that recreational hunting killed more deer than like culls and stuff. So have a look at numbers of licensed hunters over the years. You can go back to, I think, 2009, or maybe even further, for licensed deer hunters in Victoria. And then you can look at, I think last year, maybe I think 2021 is maybe the earliest, the latest you can look at. And there's a massive increase of people getting deer hunting licenses in Victoria. So just from numbers alone, this community is becoming larger. And, you know, the more people doing it, the more deer are going to be killed. So just by that, our recreational hunting is becoming a more valid tool. Like every single year, you know, you can see the increase. And then within those documents, it's called I can't remember what the document is actually called now off the top of my head, but it's the yearly report of, you know, deer harvest in Victoria. Estimates of the deer harvest in Victoria, results from surveys. So they have, you know, each year. You can look at the numbers taken of all the deer, and then down to a species level, how many deer were taken of each species, or pretty good estimates rather. Now, again, go from the earliest record that you can to the latest, and see that it's becoming more and more, like more deer are being taken. And what this is doing is this creating a baseline that says recreational hunting is a valid tool.
I suppose, and it's also an increasingly valid tool.
Yeah, exactly.
It's on an uplift.
Yeah. Now I
remember when the COVID years came out, and it was like it dropped down about 65,000 deer taken.
Yeah.
You know, in Victoria. And there was some kind of wonderful throwaway line saying something like, "This may be associated with COVID." You know, the fact that the whole place was locked down. I mean, it's surprised 60 got shot, but anyway.
Yeah,
so, I remember that one. Okay, I wonder why that was. They
do make note that the 2020 harvest is, you know, not normal, and you know shouldn't be included in like trends and stuff. So what you can do if you're mathematically inclined, but you know really need to do this because I've done this, is infer the total how many deer are being taken from the entire population. So this was kind of complicated maths, but it's really important because I've tried to disprove one of their points, where they say that current populations are too high to be controlled by recreational hunting or recent control efforts. And look, that is true. We can't do everything, but we do have these restrictions on us. Like in Queensland, we can't go to Mogul and shoot deer there. Whereas in Victoria, you could go to the equivalent of Victorian Mogul and hunt deer. But we do a really good job, and I've proved this mathematically. So Victoria estimates that they have 1 million deer, right? Their population is 1 million. And we know that around 3,000 of these are hog deer, because hog deer are very closely monitored. There's, you know, with their ballot system and on the islands and stuff. But unfortunately, unfortunately, all of the other species don't have estimates on their population sizes. Now, overseas, it's a very common tool is to use hunting harvest reports to infer demographic proxy, right? So they sort of have an idea of how many deer there are. They know the success rates of deer hunters, and they use that to kind of infer how many of each species there are. And so that's what I've done. There's no published literature on that in Australia, but I worked with a friend of mine who has a PhD in maths to get these numbers. And it was very complicated, but it's very valid. So in 2021, Victorian recreational hunters harvested around 118,000 deer. It's actually a bit under 119,000, but let's just round down to 118 just to make it easier to say. And that was approximately 68,000 and some change sambar deer, right? So 57, just under 58% of the total harvest was sambar, right? So then we can use that to infer that sambar deer make up just under 58% of the 1 million deer in Victoria. And, you know, you talk to Victorian deer hunters and they'll say that's probably about right. So that would total just under 580,000 sambar deer in Victoria. So using that, in 2021, recreational hunting harvested 11.88% of the sambar deer population. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
That's it.
using further published science, there was a study that looked at the intrinsic rate of population increase of sambar deer in Victoria. So the intrinsic rate of increase of a species is basically how much larger that population grows with each other breeding cycle over a determined period of time. Deer, like sambar breed like once a year, so they were able to try and figure out this. And now this is maths that use like life table equations and stuff. It's pretty complicated. And what it does is it accounts for natural death. So most species die, the highest rates of death are in the juvenile stage. So it accounts for deaths in the juvenile stage. You know, maybe like from foxes, dingoes, wild dogs, etc. From car collisions and other causes of death, but not hunting. And that's really important. And it's that's them. That's not like conspiracy or anything. That's a standard to do, to not include hunting in the intrinsic rate of increase. So the intrinsic rate of increase of sambar deer was between 15 and 24% each year. So their herd, I guess, increases between 15 and 24%. So if there's, you know, hang on, let's do some math. If there's 1,000, no, if there's 100, 100's easy to work with. Then next year it'll be 115 to 124.
15 to 124.
Yeah. And they estimated that they need an annual anthropogenic mortality rate. So now we're talking about human-introduced mortality, so hunting or culls, etc., of 13 to 19% to maintain a stable population. So we've just discussed that recreational hunting takes 11.88% of the sambar deer population, but sambar deer only need a 13 to 19% human-caused mortality rate just to maintain a stable population. So we're already, as a community, almost keeping the sambar population at a maintenance level, like at just a single thing. So, I mean, yeah, you know, Victorian hunters aren't introducing a population decline, but to say that they're too high to be controlled by recreational hunting, it's a bit of a misnomer.
Especially if you introduce
other
these
ways,
new tools.
And I think that's right. And I think that again, that's one of those things that resonates with people so loudly about this particular document that it tends to, well, it does. It discredits that by saying, well, it's because of the intention, those numbers don't matter. But we know that they do matter. I mean, and, you know, even anecdotally, you know, that recreational hunting does affect populations, you know, that anecdotally. I mean, Severn State Forest is a great example. You know, the opportunity to take a goat from Severn State Forest hasn't really declined, but the opportunity to take lots of goats from Severn State Forest has most definitely declined.
Yeah.
From AMP down. You know, you'll still get a goat if you go to Severn. You'll still get a goat, but you won't get the 6 to 8 that you used to get.
That's if you can get a booking more.
Yeah.
That's it. Oh, and then and that's the other thing. And two, and the fact is, from a pressure point of view, if you can't even get in there because people are always hitting that from. So you can see that in a small, you know, in a small controlled environment like Severn, you actually are getting a significant. You may be not getting a reduction, but you are getting a stabilisation of that population. Well, there was a reduction, and that reduction is somehow stabilised, and it's now at the point where, you know, the breeding cycles are as they are with goats and hunting. So yeah, I think a lot of people are challenged by that fact where they're saying that, you know, hunting is no longer an effective mechanism, and we kind of go, well, 10% is 10%, you know.
Yeah, but like anecdotes
struggle
are
without
science,
it.
though. So
That's right. Oh no, that's right. I know that. But I mean, but neither is saying that recreational hunting doesn't have is beyond, is no longer effective. That's not science either. Too. That's an observation.
Yeah, definitely. But you know, to make a good argument, you need to prove it. You need to back up your point.
Yeah. I think so.
And so that's why it's important to kind of, well, yeah, if you're going to say something, you know, back it up, and
okay,
and that's really what I really want to try and help people do, is to back up what they're saying, because the commentary has been very anecdotal. And
so I've been taking some notes. So what we're saying is that in the first instance, you know, it's better to be in the tent than outside the tent. So approach the fact that you want to actually have influence rather than have an argument with these people.
Yeah.
Second thing was, you said that it was wise to avoid the argument about the environment.
Yes.
That might not be such a good way to go. Avoid, you know, pitting one mechanism against the other. So don't say, well, this is good, this is bad. So if you're going to talk about recreational hunting, talk about it being good rather than focusing on it being, you know, others being bad. Talk about the financial value of recreational hunting. Talk about the actual effectiveness of recreational hunting in terms of quoting kill rates, and same with the financials, quoting financial, you know, the dollars involved. What else did we talk about? We talked about kill rates, the finances. Talk about the benefits specifically of ground shooting. So that, because that relies, you know, that ties in recreational hunting, and the fact that recreational hunting ground shooters are actually more cost effective than, say, a volunteer ground shooting. So it's a way of it's a cost
recreational hunter
saving activity.
Is better than a volunteer shooter.
Yeah, yes, sir. Shooter. And mentioned the fact that, in fact, recreational hunting and the kill rates of both participation and kill rates are actually increasing. So more people are getting into it. So there's more opportunity to engage with recreational hunters because they're not a declining population; they're actually an increasing population. So it's a group to be involved with because it's an increasing group, and they're, in terms of kill rates, their kill rates statistically, as shown by the various reports, are going up. One thing you didn't mention that I think is worth mentioning too is the actual benefit of recreational hunting to well-being to people. And that's something that we've spoken about in the past with people like Andrew, and the actual fact that recreational hunting is actually a worthwhile pursuit in itself. That, it's intrinsically a worthwhile pursuit for people to be involved in. So it's actually an activity that's beneficial to other things like, personal well-being, personal health, personal fitness, and things like that. So there is actually a flow-on effect from recreational hunting that is not just about dead deer on the ground.
Yeah, 100%. It's good for you. I'm not sure how interested the working group would be in that, or how effective that would be, just because it's not specifically about deer. But I mean, it could help influence, including recreational hunting as a tool. I would say it probably wouldn't hurt to include. I'm just not sure how effective it would be.
Well, and to quote your terms, there's the final thing that I took notes on is, what do you call it? The Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Is ask for Game Management Council to be established in Queensland.
Well, for that they could put pressure
or a model of public land access for recreational hunting be considered for be raised for the state of Queensland to help to realise the benefits as we see in places like Victoria and New South Wales.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I wouldn't frame it as a way for them to create this, but to put pressure on the states to do it, or get the states to consider it.
Oh yeah, and that's right. The other thing I had here is don't treat it like a shopping list to get yourself a thermal and a suppressor and a autoloader.
Yeah,
no,
a major takeaway for me. Takeaway for me was they can't write legislation. Their recommendations on thermals and optics are just recommendations. They've got no way of enforcing it or pushing it or doing anything with it. Conversely, they're recommending the development of a bait, but they're not influencing. They've got no means to develop a bait. They don't have any funding to develop a bait, or they can't tell anyone to do it. So both sides of that argument sort of work against each other as well. It's just a framework, like you say, that they're building. And like you said, it's important to be in the tent.
I think
that's a really good point. That, it's a very simple statement, but being part of it from the ground up is like you said, better than being locked out of it once it gets published. I think that's really interesting. I did want to cover one more thing. It sort of sounds like we're wrapping a little bit, but I wanted to cover something. Well, not cover it, but I wanted to ask you a question, and that was, out of what you've read and digested and not argued against, because that's a waste of time. We've heard that, so we're not arguing against it. But what is your biggest concern out of this document?
I guess.
Okay, let's not rank it. Biggest is a tough one.
I don't know.
What is a major concern for you? Yeah.
Honestly, I don't really have any concerns. As important as our contributions are and submissions are, the states don't agree on anything. The states aren't
heard that before,
effective at anything. Our road laws are different per state. Our teaching laws are different per state. Our fishing laws are different per state. To think that there's going to be a national collaboration to eradicate the deer, do you really think that Victoria is going to give up $200 million a year? Queensland may want to get rid of, put more effort into the culling of the deer, but Queensland's so big. I mean, to really do it would be really difficult. So like I think these goals are achievable if each stakeholder did it, like implemented everything.
Yeah.
Like, are they though? I mean, how often does a piece of legislation even get passed?
Well,
So I don't really
the
have that many
sensible part of me,
concerns.
the sensible part of me, or maybe no, the politically experienced part of me tends to nod my head when you speak about that. You just have to look about how we handled COVID to give you a fair example of how states handle things. You know, I mean, it's, you can
Like
see
sisters and brothers. One says yes, the other one has to say no.
There's a border patrol, and they're stopping the deer from crossing between Longshore and Texas. You know?
Yeah. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't make contributions.
No. But
don't sleep on this. But
I agree with you in that. Yeah, there is. In a way, the history of a lack of agreement between states is something in our favour in this particular instance.
yeah.
Did you have any other specific things, Daniel, before we wrap up? I don't want to let you go for you to say, damn it, I wanted to say this.
Yeah, that's true.
Get it out now, buddy. We want to hear it.
Okay. I have a few notes, actually. I have a whole book of notes.
Prepared.
All I do is write notes.
Let's go.
Good.
So I've been making commentary on this over the past maybe 6 weeks on this plan, really trying to correct misinformation that's being posted in the groups, because I think misinformation really hurts us. This has come back to bite me a little bit, because I have had people message me, and I've had people message my friends asking why I'm very obviously anti-gun or anti-hunting, why I am calling them out, why I'm taking shots at them. That's just me being bad at wording things. I've really not I've taken any shots at anyone or tried to call anyone out or anything like that. I've really just been, my commentary has been really trying to just correct the misinformation and get people to read the document and literally read the document. People have made commentary and attacked me for saying, hey, like, I've said, hey, you need to read the document before you make any commentary on this, and just gotten like spam in my DMs and all this. Because apparently I've got some undisclosed association with these guys. I'm benefiting, like I'm not at all. I'm benefiting from this, aside from just getting airtime in, talking about this. So I just really want to get that out there. I think there's commentary by other people about why haven't pigs or horses or that been included in this, because they're like, well, they're talking about deer doing damage. Well, pigs do damage, horses do damage. I'm going to be a bit snarky here and say, look, you don't need a biology degree to know that pigs aren't deer. Horses aren't deer, hence why they haven't been included in the deer plan. I don't really understand that piece of commentary, why people have been saying that. But yeah, no, pigs aren't deer, hence why they're not in the deer plan. There is a national feral pig plan that came out in 2021.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's
and I'm sure they've covered wild brumbies somewhere.
Yeah, and people are like, well, kangaroos do damage. It's like, yeah, and there's also kangaroo culling is a massive industry. So it's a weird piece of commentary that people have been making. Again, not taking shots at anyone. It's just a freaking weird piece of commentary. And something you guys said is that
just about that, mate. Just about the weird piece of commentary. I think what might be a better way to say this is that I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think maybe a way to make something positive of that is that in your submission, it would be unwise to get into an argument about pigs do more damage than deer, so this deer plan is invalid. What you're saying is that this deer plan is focused on deer. And so if you're going to make a submission, don't try to bleed it across to say, well, pigs do worse, or, cows or
farmers' cows do worse.
Farmers pollute, methane gas or something like that. Stay on topic, which is, in this particular instance, we're talking about deer. So it's important we talk about deer, not to try and bring other issues into it, which is valid, and I can understand it because people are defending, and I understand, and that's defense. Well, what about this and what about that? But what you're saying is that in this instance, what about this and what about that probably doesn't lend any useful weight to your submission.
Yeah, and it'd be a fair comment to say that this plan came out, it hit the public arena for consultation, and there would have been a lot of comment about this prior to it even being read. Like, people will just automatically believe this is an attack on deer hunters, and they just knee-jerk reactions, and that's really sad. That's just what happens.
Yeah,
that's it. But I mean, that's to be, in a way, I feel that's the way I explain that is that it's a for many people, and I'm one of those people included, is that it's just a legacy of gun laws that, and not to derail too much, but for a lot of us in '96. We kind of accepted that we accepted the argument that something had to change. But I think a lot of people accepted that argument on good faith. That is, okay, if we accept these changes, you'll leave us be. And what actually unfortunately unfolded is that once you accepted the changes, you became a punching bag, and then you just became a continuous punching bag. And I think what a lot of that, what about pigs, what about cows, is just a reflection of that. People see this as another round of punches. So I think it's important that, we accept that a lot of people feel that way, because it's probably a legacy of just being, the local. I mean, if you're a gun owner in this country, you've gone from being, a redneck to a potential, killer, to a potential, for a while we were potential terrorists. I mean, and so you just become the latest punching bag, and I think that's what that reflects. And I myself, I don't agree with it, but I certainly have sympathy for those people, because at times you just kind of go, just leave me alone. Eh? I've jumped through all the hopes. I've done all the stuff you want me to do. Just give me a break. And I think that might be that expression of that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I didn't really, so think of that, but it's if you're going to publish something, and then in that thing you're going to publish, you're going to say, why aren't pigs included in this? All you have to do is guess. All you have to do is guess pig action plan, and it's a real thing. So
that's right.
Look it up,
and I think more importantly, that's right. Yeah. And I think from your point, more importantly, that would be a way that you might inadvertently own goal your own submission, because they'll kind of go, this guy's talking about pigs.
Not
to the bottom of the pile.
Yep.
So you're actually own goaling. You're actually giving them a reason to not listen to you.
Yeah, exactly. That's a lot more eloquent than I would say.
It's amazing what you can do.
Yeah, and other things. Tonight you said vertebrate species, like there's to be no successful. But in the last podcast, you said there's been no successful removal of just invasive species, and it's not this again. This is being nitpicky. We've pretty much won against the prickly pear.
Invasive.
Prickly pear was a massive one where we introduced prickly pear.
I'll give you that. Yeah, but
forestry.
didn't we introduce something horrible to get rid of the prickly pear, and we've still got that horrible thing?
This is a massive win for invasion ecology. So there used to be massive forestry of prickly pear, They were over 3 meters tall, covering acres and acres. So then scientists were like, okay, what kills the prickly pear? The prickly pear moth. They introduced that, killed most prickly pear, and got rid of those massive acres upon acres of 3 meter tall cacti. And there was no side effects from the moths. They just died.
So what you're saying,
being
we've won
nitpicky.
against things
Things
that
that
can't
can't migrate.
move. We've beaten things that can't move.
Yeah.
That's
right.
We can, if it can't move, we've got a
Name all
chance.
the deer
We're
then.
good at picking on things smaller than us. So, yeah.
So basically, we need to invent a
Name
poison
them and
that
then we can
stops
kill
deer
them.
from moving, and we got them on the run.
Yeah, go for the knees. But yeah, I just wanted to be nitpicky and so that.
That's
but
okay.
otherwise, no, that's really it. That's all my notes. You guys did well on your recording. I really liked it.
Just wanted to share something to you. Your point about the fact that that your DMs have been bombarded, and I think that's not a pleasant thing at all. And and I suppose you can look to quotes, and I think Churchill said, if you're upsetting people, you've obviously got something important to say, and I'll give you an example. Okay. That's a sporting shooter magazine that I published, or that was published
I've got that
in
one.
2013. Okay, you got that one?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I'm a bit of a hoarder.
So here you go. What was wrong with that photo?
The bolt's closed.
That's right. I got picked up with the bolts closed. What was the other thing that was wrong with that photo?
Zoom in.
Yeah, put it closer. I can't see.
Is there a tongue hanging out or something?
You got hair there.
Supposedly the nanny was pregnant, and I shot her pregnant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Now I thought that was a 2 for the price of 1, but
That's a win.
Well,
Right.
that asks the question.
That's the expression.
Is
Two
it
birds, one
okay
stone.
to eat the fetus? No?
I thought it was a price of price. 1, it wasn't pregnant. I just shot him off the water, and it was a gut full of water.
All right.
But 2, I got a fair bit of stick for that one, and the stick was 1, the bolt was closed, and I was demonstrating poor safety practices.
Is it though?
Well,
oh, yeah.
I didn't
know.
even want to argue over that because 1, the rifle wasn't right. Because you all know that I never carry
Around
a rifle with the round in the chamber anyway. And two, but more importantly, I shot a feral goat on public land under the auspice of killing feral goats on public land, as you are by the R license. And the thing was, I'd shot a pregnant goat,
Yeah.
which was unethical. And my response, because I got the letters from the editor, one of my responses was I thought I was good because I did a 2 for 1.
Yeah, that's a win. I mean,
That's it. That was a win. So yeah, mate. It's a shame that you've copped flack. Even if you say something that is, even if you make a mistake, it's a mistake is a mistake, and it's a shame you cop flack. But it's a reality of you sticking your neck out there, you're going to cop some flack.
yeah, it's just like one of those things. It's just annoying. I am definitely not anti-gun.
It'll get on your
definitely
nerves.
not
I think
anti-hunting.
the first negative comments we received when we started doing the podcast, pretty sure the first one got under my nerves a little bit. The second one, not so much. And now everyone has an opinion. I get it. And some people like to voice it. It's far easier to voice your opinion on a keyboard than it is
Remember
face-to-face.
there was one guy on one of the Facebook pages who
on
used to
the
go after us all the time.
I'm just going to say thank you a lot for reaching out and coming and talking to us about the facts and the details, how to help people make a response. I think there are only a real select few people that pick up the pen and respond to something like this, and it's important to help people get that right. So you've done a great job with that. I listen to all the guests that come on the podcast, but I listened very intently to this conversation because there was so much detail in it. and I thought it was wonderful. So thanks very much. I'm sure the others will agree, but they'll have their own additional comments, no doubt.
I'm almost mindful to say something. Yeah, to support what Ian said. Look, thanks for taking the time to come on. We really appreciate it, and you gave us a different insight. That's been really very useful, and it's helped round out that document for us, certainly for me anyway. So,
yeah, and I'll echo what they've said as well. Thanks very much, mate.
You all right, Daniel?
Yeah, my tech issues, so I'm not going to talk.
No, you're right, mate. Well, thanks again, and we'll keep in touch on this. If anyone wants to have a look at your document, your submission, you said it's on your website. Are you able to call out your website details so people can find you? And we'll also chuck it in the description below.
Yeah. So it's just eurekatactical.com, and if you want to read my specific submission, just like on the top, there's like articles. Just click on that, and then National Feral Deer Action Plan submission. That's like 6 pages.
Awesome. We'll definitely share a link to that. That's for sure.
Awesome.
Thanks very much, mate.
All right. Good stuff, mate. Thank you.